I asked my subscribers on my YouTube community tab to list off players, coaches, teams, metas, or whatever else is on their mind, past or present, so I can give takes on if I believe they're being overrated, underrated, or properly rated by the Overwatch esports community. It's been over a year since the last part of the series, so I think it's time for a fresh installment. And a shout out goes to Barry McCockner, as usual, a sports YouTuber who has given me the inspiration to take his series and turn it into an Overwatch version. And I apologize in advance if I did not get to your question. I picked out a handful, obviously could not get to all of them, otherwise this video would be like 10 hours long, but we're gonna start with my guy Wolfenite, one of my YouTube mods. He's wanted to know my opinion on Choi Hyobin for like the last 2 episodes of the series, and I just completely forgot about it both times, so we're gonna start with him. He says, it's been so long, I don't even know if any OWCS people know who Choi is. Well, Tank Choi anyway. When they think Choi, they probably think the washed DPS player. And yeah, that's a fair point. It's been a long time since Choi has played. It's been like 4 years since his retirement at this point. If you're a new gen fan and you're unfamiliar, Choi Hyobin was a former off-tank player in the Overwatch 1 era for the San Francisco Shock, and he was incredible. He helped them to win 2 championships, and he was recognized as one of the best tank players of all time in the Overwatch 1 era. With that type of resume, it feels like it should be easy to say he's properly rated and move on with our lives, but it doesn't feel that simple. Maybe it's because it's been a long time since he's played, but I don't see many people discuss Choi in that top tank of all time conversation anymore. Maybe it's because Overwatch 2 changed the landscape significantly, maybe it's because other talents have come in and have had pretty high peaks themselves, but Choi definitely had one of the highest peaks of any tank player all time, and I think it's unfair to not recognize what he accomplished just because Overwatch 1 is more so seen as a distant memory these days. It's gonna sound crazy, but these days I think of Choi Hyobin as slightly underrated by the overall Overwatch community. There are some modern day players who are still around that will tell you that it was scary playing against Choi at his peak on the San Francisco Shock. There was a 3-year stretch where that guy was always one of the best contributors on their team. He won 2 Overwatch League finals with these guys, and he was a pretty important part of both runs with some great Sigma play, including 2019 when he literally won Grand Finals MVP. And that's not even mentioning his diva, how that was one of the all-time best during that time period, how he was an innovator on that character in the GOATS era, and the fact that he has such a crazy clutch gene. There's not many better. Sometimes I really do think he's the uncontested most clutch tank player in Overwatch esports history. Whether he's on the winning end or the losing end, that's a guy you can count on to navigate the chaos and not crack under the pressure. He made so many of the correct choices, placing bombs where they need to be, getting those multi-kills when the rest of the team around him is dying. Choi was just a monster. That guy was a pure winner, and I think people are starting to forget about him because it's been so long since he's played, and I will not stand for it. The next question comes from Harold. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, but they say, I think Galaa is underrated. He's been overshadowed by Simple and Landon lately, even though I think he's still world class and up there with them, especially if you consider his flexibility. And yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. I also believe Galaa is slightly underrated as a player. I think unfortunately EMEA is just a bit weak on support compared to some of the other regions out there. There aren't that many high class names. It just so happens that Landon and Simple are at like that top tier, so it makes it very easy for them to stand out over other guys and they get all the love and the attention. But Galaa's been a rather consistent aspect of Virtus Pro since joining the team at the beginning of the season. He has been very flexible throughout his career, kind of juggling both roles in some aspects. We've seen him play Lucio, we've seen him transition to a full flex support on this VP team, and he always finds success. He's mastered a ton of heroes throughout his career. He always does what is asked of him, and while I wouldn't consider him to be this crazy ceiling riser, he definitely is someone who raises your floor, which can be very important too. It helps maintain that consistent competitive nature that you're looking for, and Galaa helps provide that. He's done it in multiple systems, and especially for like non-Asia standards, if you strictly look at the West, he's got to be up there as one of the better flex supports. So Galaa definitely on the underrated side in my opinion. Next up, I have another one of my mods, Mir this time. Originally, he wanted to know my thoughts on Sir Majed, but he has pivoted over to Heisu. He feels that he is very forgotten for no reason, and I am inclined to agree. Heisu was actually a very skilled player. A lot of people were excited about him coming out of Runaway, entering the Overwatch League, and he did have a good start to his career on the Philadelphia Fusion. But understandably so, he chose to leave, and that's where the main issue arises. He unfortunately fell victim to playing on a lot of mediocre to below average teams. It can be very easy to forget about the guys who lose and don't do much of anything. You'll think about some good moments they have here and there, but they're nothing but a distant memory compared to the winners who you're always going to think about. Heisu decided to join the Toronto Defiant, and that basically sealed his fate, because Toronto happened to be a very mediocre franchise. They're always middle of the pack every single year without fail, and there was no exception when Heisu was there. 2021, they had like a okay team. They were a play-in level team, but it felt like Heisu carrying to no avail. Shout out to that game against Atlanta where he went crazy on the Hanzo. Probably one of the best individual performances in Overwatch history. Check that game out if you haven't already. But then we go to 2022, where they start to actually build a better team around him. They actually make the playoffs. He had Twilight and Chorong at his side. Hoppa wasn't bad either, but it still wasn't quite enough to truly be competitive. And once again, a lot of the time, as a result, we'd see this guy carry just for it to not matter. His Ashe and Sojourn were both elite in 2022, but no one remembers because he played on Toronto. And obviously, once he joined Shanghai in 2023, things just got even worse. It's very unfortunate because Heisu, under different circumstances, had he joined a better team after leaving Philly, probably would have been remembered more fondly by the community if he was able to find some playoff success, you know what I mean? Unfortunately, that never came. The path that he chose ended up being one that did not benefit his career. So Heisu goes long forgotten at times, especially by non-Philly and Toronto fans out there. Heisu is absolutely underrated, 1000%. Next we have Theo, and he actually is not the only person who asked for this, but he says Kellix. Genuinely never hear anybody talking about him, and he's on the best EMEA team. This is a fair point. Kellix is not someone who gets talked about all that often. Between being a main support and just being relatively quiet as a player, it can be hard for this dude to stand out, but I do recognize that this year in particular, he has been pretty good. In my opinion, this is the best he's looked in his entire career, which is insane to think about considering he's been a pro for like 8 or 9 years at this point. It has been forever. This dude has been competing for ages through several generations of pros, and now he seems to be looking his absolute best. I give the guy a lot of credit. When he joined OWCS, you could tell there was a difference. Definitely an upgrade over Haku. He's been a very nice addition to that team, and he's contributed a lot more than I thought. However, Kellix is always going to be one of the weaker links on his team. That's just been the case, and I think that continues on Katsuya as well. They are a very loaded team, and if you look at Kellix's career, historically, he joins a lot of these loaded teams and then just rides them to success as a decent contributor, but clearly one of the weaker links on the team. It's no disrespect to Kellix, it's just the simple truth. Think back to Boston Uprising, British Hurricane, Twisted Minds, now OWCS. That just seems to be the case every time when you think about him and where he stands compared to the rest of his team. And I think a lot of people would agree with me there. As much as I want to say he's underrated, I won't quite go there. I think that most people understand he is good this season, but not anything out of this world, so I will go with properly rated. Next up, Moldy Mallard says, China as a region. I feel they're being massively underrated and Weibo can make a run at the tournament. I'm pretty excited to answer this one, and I know I haven't been covering China all that much this year at all, but I've been watching a little bit here and there. I've seen what's been going on recently, and I definitely would agree with you that China is underrated. They have some pretty good teams. Weibo, we've seen what they can be at their peak. Maybe they haven't been that great as of late, but they've been able to consistently compete with and sometimes defeat the likes of Falcons. They're right up there because of their experience factor and some of the amazing players that they have, but it goes beyond them. I'd even argue that Team CC is being underlooked. They have consistently shown steady progression since becoming an OWCS team. They surprised the world in Stage 1, and they make the first LAN, and they end up being decently competitive. Then in Stage 2, make another LAN, they get even more competitive, almost pull off a massive upset against GK Esports. And now here in Stage 3, we haven't seen them play on LAN just yet, but they did take Weibo to 6 maps, which is pretty insane. It seems like they're super capable of pulling off a major upset or two in this bracket alongside Weibo. You got to give a major shout out to Kaneki and some of the other players on this team. They've looked absolutely incredible. Genuinely, CC and Weibo might be the two biggest surprises of DreamHack Sweden. I am not even kidding. Since China has gotten back into competing full-time, that gap has closed significantly, and this might be where we see the peak. China, absolutely underrated. Next, OJ3_OJ357 says, Zest is underrated. He has quietly been super important for this T1 team. His hero pool is extremely deep, being extremely good on the Sim and Venture in the mid-season championship, and he is able to run Genji, Tracer, and Sombra to an S tier level. I won't necessarily agree with everything you say here, but yeah, Zest has been pretty important for this T1 team, and maybe sometimes he goes a little underappreciated because of the likes of Donghack and even Proud as well. It's just been a really fun story to watch with those two young players, but as the veteran of this team, he has contributed. He looks like he's in top form again. I mean, back in the Seoul Infernal days, Philadelphia Fusion days, it feels like that version of Zest is back. I've been saying it for a while. His Tracer in particular had a lot of great performances on her throughout all of Korea this season when he played on this T1 team. And I would say right now, he is probably the number 3 flex DPS of the region. I think most people would agree, outside of Proper and Heesang, he's probably number 3, if not firmly in your top 5. Now, all that said, I don't know if I can say he's underrated as a player. Maybe a little underappreciated when it comes to the contributions of his team this season, but I think most people after watching T1 the last few stages realize that he's one of the better DPS out there right now based off of all of the really solid performances. Zest is a beast, and I think a lot of people have hyped him up online, so I'll say that he is very properly rated, at least for now. Speaking of Heesang, he's the next guy on the list. Agents Main wanted to know my opinion because they believe that he is very underrated. And Heesang's been a pretty interesting figure in the community, very polarizing in OWCS this season. I've seen a lot of people like this commenter say that he's pretty underrated, but I've seen plenty of people on the other side say that he's very overrated and that he just gets to be on a really good team, and if you put another good flex DPS in his shoes, they'll be just as successful, and that he's really not that meaningful for his team's success. I've seen it all. There's a nice contrast, a nice 50-50 split going on, and I think because of that, that means he's probably properly rated. There's a good amount of hate and love for the guy. In my personal opinion, I also think that he's just fine. He didn't get any worse than last season. I think he may have gotten a little bit better, but I think people recognize he still is one of the best DPS players in all of the Korea region and generally in the entire world. Does he have some quiet games where he disappears where his team needs him? Sure, but in return, he's also put up a lot of big performances this season, especially in tournament games. And we can't just sit here and act like there weren't other moments where he was good in his career. I know it started off shaky for the Shock in 23, but when he joined the Titans, he looked pretty promising. He was great on O2 Blast. Heesang's had a pretty good career for the most part, and I think people are giving him way too hard of a time. But in spite of that, I'd still say properly rated. I can't say he's underrated because he is one of the best flex DPS in the game, but I can't say he's overrated either. Let's see, next up we have Charlie, and this is going to be a fun one. The 2020 early season brawl meta. Rhine Diva, McCree, now known as Cassidy of course, Mei, Lucio, Ana. Not gonna lie, really glad you asked this one. This is one of my all-time favorite OWL metas that we got to watch. I know it's pretty bare bones and basic, but I think that's why I like it. I appreciate the beauty of its simplicity. Just a more simple time where there's less to understand. The game was a lot less evolved back then, and for some people, that sucks. But for me personally, that's how I like it. I think simple can sometimes mean better, and this is just one of those cases. It's just good, honest Overwatch. You've got the Reinhardt when he can actually be viable. You got the Diva who can peel for him, but then also be there for her backline. The beauty of having 2 tanks in your lineup. I thought it was fun watching a lot of the elite players on cast just go crazy, hitting all those headshots like Carpe and whatnot. The Mei, I mean, there were some amazing Mei plays that we saw back in 2020, and I think Lucio Ana is one of the most honest backlines that you can possibly have. My 2 favorite support heroes in the game, and they both played just such different roles that can be very enjoyable to watch, and we saw a lot of players thrive as a result. Vintage, FD God, Funny Astro, Lige, Gone, Alarm, Twilight, etc. Just a very fun time watching players on support heroes that don't necessarily have the craziest skill ceiling in the world, but that's kind of what made it more enjoyable compared to some of the stuff that we see nowadays, for example. It was just nice to see teams play around Rein without it being a complete pain in the neck to do. Like, seeing him be a viable character in the game, kind of a rarity after this season, so it was nice while it lasted. In my opinion, just because it was so short-lived, hella underrated comp where it felt like just about every player in the lobby could always contribute. Absolutely loved this time period. Next up is Brandon, who says, Unter I think is a good one. Obviously, there's more to the story, but as soon as he leaves SSG, they start looking competent. I'm not sure how the community feels about him, but as an SSG fan, I'm glad the guy is gone. Sheesh. I mean, yeah, if you're looking at this season in particular, obviously, Unter, it kind of seemed like he was ready to stop coaching. He stepped into more of the streaming / content creation scene, and he's doing well there. He seems very happy, so I don't necessarily blame him that much for SSG kind of failing. Maybe they just needed a more motivated coach, but generally speaking, I think Unter is underappreciated. People meme on this guy. He's like this big streamer now, and he's super funny, but he was actually a pretty good coach in his heyday. He made a difference on a lot of teams in the Overwatch League. He was on the Valiant for a while, and they were pretty decent when he was around. In 2021, he joins Atlanta. They go to a grand finals. 2022, becomes an assistant on the Gladiators coaching staff, and they won 2 different tournaments for crying out loud. Success followed this guy everywhere, and if I remember correctly, he even coached British Hurricane for a short period of time. I would never hate on Unter because of like one not great season where maybe his heart wasn't totally in it. If you look at his pedigree as a whole, it's really great. Highly above average. I think Unter is definitely underrated as a coach. Next up, we have Tyke, I want to say. Can you also rate Finn? Finn, I'm surprised I've never gotten to because he's a guy that is surprisingly popular. I don't think that much of him personally. Like, he's fine, but he's not anything out of this world. But it feels like a lot of people have strong opinions about Finn. I'd like to think that Finn has done fine in his career. There's never been a point where I've said this dude is a championship caliber flex support, but I also haven't many times said that he is absolutely awful. Does he maybe sell occasionally? Yeah, but a lot of support players do, so I don't really put that against him too much. He's just fine. I was hoping he could have been more coming out of contenders. Hasn't really worked out that way, but he's been a good option on a lot of good teams throughout his career. I don't think that he is good enough to win it all. I think there's options that you should be taking over him if that is your goal. But for what Finn is, if you're just trying to be competitive, he gets the job done. And I'll be for real, even though Finn seems to be a lot more polarizing than I initially realized, I don't see many people fighting for this guy tooth and nail saying that he's super underappreciated. I think we all kind of understand he's just in that middling tier, so I'm going to say that Finn is properly rated. Next is Synchro FPS. Is alexyOWL overrated or underrated? alexyOWL is a guy who just gives you that consistency. He's just a good, solid flex DPS player. I kind of feel bad for the guy though, because he hasn't gotten that many opportunities at the top. When he was on the Spark in 2022, they mostly were just mediocre, but then had that playoff run, and he was obviously never going to stay on that team long term. Then he was on a very bad Washington Justice team, yet he carried his butt off on that team. Now he's on Zeta Division, who definitely have had chances, but they've always fallen short. I wish he could play on like a Crazy Raccoon, for example. I wish I could see what that looks like, because I think with proper resources around him, with a genuinely really good team from top to bottom, that he could be a star that wins a type of MVP level award. The guy's gone through the ringer on losing teams, having to switch positions, but through it all, he has maintained good consistency on his role. Genji, Pharah, Echo, Tracer, this guy can still play, and I'm hoping that this next year he can escape Zeta Division and go elsewhere. I'll say Alpha Yi is a little bit underrated. Not by much, but sometimes I believe he isn't talked about enough in the flex DPS conversation, strictly because of the crappy team that he plays for. Next up, we have Wild5065, who says, I think Yubie could spark some interesting discussion. And yeah, I'd agree with you. Yubie's obviously a very polarizing figure in this community. There's a lot of Yubie defenders out there, but there's also a lot of Yubie haters, be it because of his gameplay or from some other controversies. I believe I've come to terms with my stance on Yubie. There were times where I thought he wasn't any good, other moments where I thought he was pretty damn good, and I've landed somewhere in the middle where I think he is relatively solid, but not anything overly amazing. I think he is good at what he is asked to do. He specializes in certain things, and he usually executes on those specific heroes. His main claim to fame, and a big reason why Twisted Minds and the Saudi team were pretty good at certain moments, was because of his leadership on Symmetra. Not many people are moving on her like he does, one of the best we've ever seen on that character, and then the rest is kind of just okay. We know he can play some Pharah, maybe a little Echo. His Tracer can be hit or miss. I think it goes underappreciated when it comes to the mechanics. It's just the execution isn't always there. We've seen him play well against Kevster in a couple of instances, but also get diffed by Checkmate in return. I think his Mei is also alright, can be hit or miss. He's just a decent specialist who can be a good team leader as well. I think Yubie is a fine player, but I wouldn't necessarily want him to be a full-time starter, if that makes any sense. It comes down to meta and circumstances heavily. Generally, I believe that Yubie is properly rated by the community. There's a lot of hate for him and a lot of love, and I think that it evens out perfectly. Moving on, we have Ty Cronier2619, who says, Nico, Veryl's hit scan. You know what? I'll even do you one better. Japan's another region I have not given much love to, but we've got to recognize they are starting to be on the up and coming. Last year was about initiating themselves into the scene. They've been improving steadily. Veryl themselves, that team, has done pretty well in Japan. I mean, it takes skill to win 3 straight championships over there. They've looked amazing, and there's room for them to maybe not be the worst team in this upcoming playoffs. I like what they've got. Specifically, Nico, their hit scan, like you mentioned, as well as KSG on tank. Those guys are stars in the making, and they're somebody that you can maybe build around as you go towards the future and try and close that gap even more between yourself and some of the other main regions out there. I think if up against the right opponent, those guys could shine, and it helps that you have a couple of Korean imports to push you just a little bit more over the edge, especially with Top Dragon. Him and Nico together feel like a pretty good duo, and I am genuinely very excited to see what Veryl bring to the table, because this could be a big moment that swings their future in a very positive direction. Moving on, we have XChronic575, who says, Merit, interested to see the rating. We've definitely seen many great hit scan players like Quartz. Is there a gap between Merit and the others? I'm gonna give an emphatic no. I don't think there's that much of a difference between Merit and some of the other top hit scans. Merit at his best on Falcons, we've already seen that he can compete. We saw it several times during the most recent tournament in Stage 3, but look at what happened in the mid-season championship as well. Him and Proper popped off and they complemented each other perfectly. Merit can still play. He took a small break, but he's shown time after time that he still can be that guy. Is he necessarily the first choice for you at Hitscan? I mean, probably not, knowing that there's Lip Courts and some of the other guys out there, but it's not like Merit lags behind them and stands no chance in a matchup. There's no need to overthink it. He is a proven winner in the clutch at many levels. A finals MVP on Florida Mayhem, good during his runaway days, Good on the Toronto Defiant last year. Good now on Team Falcons. This guy can play when given the proper resources, but also Hitscan in general can just be weird. That's a place where you can get diffed on any given day. Hitscan is all about who is hot and cold. That's just how the position goes. Knowing how Merit has played this year in particular, I'm very happy to say that he has been properly rated by the community. He's had a lot of great moments, and we recognize it for what it is. And for the last question of the video from Koinada, Gushue, Shy, Leaf, Pelican, Alfie, Bernard, Weibo Gaming. That is a lot, so we'll do a small lightning round here. We already talked about Alfie, so he's off the board. We can essentially just combine Gushue, Shy, and Leaf with all of Weibo. We can run down the list. So Weibo as a whole, I think, are actually a little overrated. They haven't done all that much to prove themselves. I know they almost beat Team Falcons and went to a crazy map 5, but outside of that, really not all that impressive. I think they're very susceptible to losing to a lot of the Western teams, especially knowing the flexibility and what we've seen in China as of late. Gushue, I'd say, probably properly rated. We still recognize him as an all-time great, but we know that he has his limitations. There's going to be certain things that he thrives on, other things where he is just okay. Shy, I'd also think, is still around the properly rated level. He is an absolute monster on the hit scan, still a carry who can compete with the very best, so properly rated. For Leave, this is a guy you could maybe argue is a bit on the overrated side at this point. That's my opinion, but it's not the only time I've seen people say this. A lot of people have been getting off the Leave train saying he may not even be the best flex DPS in his region anymore, so take that as you will. That's up to you to decide. But I think Leave has disappeared a lot recently in his career. I think he disappeared against Virtus Pro in the mid-season championship as well. He just picks and chooses when to be great. I'd like to see him be consistent more often. Not saying it's all his fault as to why Weibo come up short, but he's certainly not helping with some lackluster performances and some pretty big moments from a guy that we know can be very, very good. Let's see, Pelican, I'd say, is maybe on the overrated side as well. He hasn't been contributing as much as even last year or prior years this season on Zeta Division. He feels somewhat washed, mostly only reliable on the Genji. Other things, a bit more difficult to notice him these days. I don't know. Pelican's kind of fallen off. I think he's at the tail end of his career, or at the bare minimum, needs some type of scenery change. It's to the point where he may not even be a top 5 flex DPS in Korea anymore. It's kind of crazy, but that's just how careers tend to go sometimes. And then finally, we have Bernard. I want to say he's underrated, but we all know that he's a beast and that he hasn't been getting as much playtime because Mag's there. And, you know, there are certain things that Mag can play that he just can't. He's limited by his hero pool with the monkey and the wrecking ball, but we know that he just needs to be freed from this team. Bernard on a real team would probably help lead them very deep in a playoff push. I'd like to think if Bernard was on another relevant team that he would be at DreamHack Sweden right now. This guy's been carrying this team for years just for it to not matter. Bernard is an absolute beast. We all love that guy. The last 3 years he has been on a tear in his career, properly rated. And I think that's a pretty good place to stop, at least for now. I feel bad that I didn't get to all of the questions. I apologize if yours didn't get included in the video. I think I'm going to go back on the community tab after this video goes up and answer all the questions I didn't get to. And feel free to keep firing them away on that post. I'd love to keep on answering them and maybe have some inspiration for the next video. And if you want to see another part to the series, please make sure to give this one a like, subscribe, and tell me what you think down in the comments below. Your feedback is greatly appreciated. I've been ATP, and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace out.